have questions, and I'm going to open it up. So I plant the seed in your minds to have questions for kids pretty soon. Let's start with the beginning. Why? Tell me about the origins of the story. Why you wanted to tell it.
There are two answers to this. One is when I was in high school, I made a short film about a cat who was afraid of water, because I had two cats growing up, and that was a simple hand-drawn short. But then after making a bunch of more shorts, and then my first feature film, Away, which I basically did on my own, I had an opportunity to work on a bigger scale and with a team for the first time. And so I decided to tell a story about a character who used to be very independent and then has to learn how to collaborate and trust others. So basically like me making this particular film. And I decided to revisit that idea of a cat being afraid of water, but this time expanding the cast, adding more characters. Also, there's a dog, which is inspired by two dogs I've had. So I'm always looking for that personal aspect, because it takes so long to make these films. This took 5 years. So I tried to find something that really holds my interest for such a long time. And it's not that there's a saying, write what you know, but this wasn't something I knew. This was something I wanted to learn. Kind of making this film was my way of figuring out myself how to collaborate, and kind of having this idea as a basis of the story kind of forced me to do this, because I had all these anxieties of kind of giving up control, and also having the imposter syndrome of not really being sure if I'm ready to do that, being responsible for all this team and all the budget we had. So just exploring these ideas on the screen.
Yeah, I thought there's so many themes, things you're exploring in the film, and I love that you're using these really adorable animals for it. And I am curious about how you selected the animals, the type of animals or the breeds that are in the film.
So it all started with the cat, and so the cat starts out being very independent and learns to be more trustful. And I wanted to balance that by having the dog, which is the opposite. It starts out being very trustful, always looking for someone to tell them what to do, and it ends up being more independent. It was my way of showing that maybe there's positives and negatives to both of these ideas, and letting the audience figure out the right balance for themselves. And the other animals, so it's kind of like casting with actors. When I'm writing, I'm trying to imagine what kind of chemistry they might have if we put them in this confined space. What kind of conflict might arise, which is a recipe for storytelling, and also comedy. So each of them had to be very distinctive. I was thinking about the silhouette, so that it's very recognizable, and also the voices, that we can understand which is which. So I knew that there should be a bird. We need a very big bird because it needs to be able to carry the cat. So we settled on this secretary bird from South Africa, because this character had to have a very kind of majestic presence. The cat really needs to look up to the bird and to kind of it's the only other character that it respects, basically. And so the secretary bird had that quality. And there's the lemur, which is obsessed about these objects, but basically it thinks through that it will others will like it. It will find kind of every one of these characters is looking for a way to be accepted, for a place they belong. They just have different ways of achieving that. So everyone is kind of selected considering the theme, the greater theme of the story. And finally the capybara, which is they're from South and Central America, and they're very peaceful in real life. They're very friendly. They seem to get along with everyone, and so this really fit the theme of, again, finding that trust with others. But it was also very funny to have this character always asleep, even in the most intense moments. And every one of these characters kind of goes on a journey and learns something
into the film that were close, but you decided to not include?
Well, we tried different kind of types of dogs until we settled on these. The whale creature that we see, it started out being a real whale basically, but we needed it to feel scary at first. And seeing a real whale, you didn't get afraid of a real whale. They're very peaceful. So we pushed the design into a more kind of mythological direction, and also revealing it through glimpses at first, and to make you feel like you are the cat. That's important to create a very subjective experience, to put you inside the cat's point of view. So the cat is afraid of this creature, so we should be as well. And that's how every decision was made, to kind of make you feel like the cat, and the whole world is basically designed considering that. And it's not just there to look pretty. Like every decision is there. I start with emotion, and then I kind of reverse engineer it and build this environment to convey what the cat is supposed to feel in this moment, because we don't have dialogue. They can't explain that. We have to use other tools to explain what the cat feels.
Yeah, to that point, you talked so wonderfully about the different journeys that these characters are going on in quite a dramatic world. And you don't have dialogue. And I'm curious if for you that was freeing in a way to not have dialogue, to have to explain all that, or if it made you work harder to visually show this journey without dialogue.
It wasn't never a question I had whether to have dialogue or not, because all the films I've done so far are without dialogue, so to me that's actually easier. Using dialogue would be a greater challenge. But yeah, I also think we've seen kind of many animated films where the animals are talking and walking on two legs and basically thinking very similar to humans, and I thought it would be more interesting to kind of have them be cats and dogs. I think it makes the story more emotional, because there's an innocence to them that we care about them immediately, and everything seems just so much bigger from the cat's point of view, and we imagine our own pets going through this, and I think our instincts and fears and desires are much more similar to animals than many of us tend to consider, and so we can relate to them. I think. Also, they're so funny that we don't need to have them tell jokes. I think I wanted the humor to come from the character. They're not gags sprinkled on top of the story. They're kind of driven by their personalities and hopefully revealing something about them. Yeah, with our dialogue, that's a good point. That this is a dialogue-free film rather than a silent film, because the sound and the music I think play an even greater part than in most films, because they have to fill that void that's left by not having dialogue, and we can push them a lot further. Because dialogue tends to dominate everything. That's where you focus your attention. But yeah, this time the music has really long periods to build. It's not interrupted, so you get really immersed in that emotion. And also, there are long sequences without music where it's just the sounds. That was also important, which was quite. I thought the sound designer would be very excited about that, but he was very anxious actually to have this responsibility to hold the attention for such a long time and not being able to hide behind the music or dialogue. But again, I wanted it to feel very immersive, that it feels like a real world, and it feels very tangible, and yeah. So, and also with the visuals, with the camera, I wanted to express a lot with the camera. It's not just functional; it's really almost like a character itself. I wanted to have these imperfections where it's reacting to things and maybe not catching everything perfectly, as if a real person is holding a camera. And also, sometimes it gets distracted by something and looks away from the cat and notices something in the background. But in animation, you don't get this for free like you would in real life. Everything is there for a reason. And yeah, but I also wanted these long takes. There are two shots which go on for almost 5 minutes. And for that reason, my method of making that is I don't use storyboards. Instead, I do everything in 3D, and I create this kind of rough version of the environment and put the characters in there, and I explore ideas time I write myself.
I have more questions, but I want to make sure we have time for the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Yes, right here.
Yes, my name is Mara Lewis, Latvian Theater in San Francisco. I have a question. This is the first nomination of Oscars for Latvia in any movie ever. So what is the process from the idea to the Oscar nomination, and are there any shortcuts?
Well, it's when you're making a film, I think it's probably for the best not to think about all that, and just to focus on telling something that feels honest, and I think I think this film found an audience because it wasn't trying to be like other films, and I think that's why people resonate to it, because it's something you haven't seen, and I think that's the shortcut, just trying something new, and that's like a risk you're taking, because it might as well turn out very badly, but yeah, I think that's what people want. They want to see something new, and the process is, it's 5 years. We had to start the studio in Latvia. We had to find all these also partners and friends in Belgium, and we had to basically build an industry where there really isn't an industry. We had to find these kind of artists and teach them, and also teach ourselves how to work in this way, because none of us had really done it. We had worked in our own stuff, but we had to figure out how to work together as a team, so that we're making the same film instead of everyone pulling the film in different directions. And so it's a very long process, but I don't know, shortcut. It's like if I knew, then everyone would be doing it. So everyone is very unpredictable. And I think it's just telling personal stories. It's very it's kind of trying new things. I think it's very exciting that also like independent animation is kind of being noticed and being treated as equal to some of the bigger films, and because it's really all about the story. I think like the technicalities of course are important, but you can tell a great story, and even if it's like very simple, it can really resonate. So I think that's what filmmakers should focus on, really kind of storytelling rather than the technicalities.
I do appreciate when you've been doing the circuit, winning a Golden Globe, that you use those opportunities to talk about the significance of not only the film, but where it comes from, the community, and all of that. So that's really special. Other questions from the audience? Yes, right here in front.
Did you study the animals a lot to understand their movements?
Well, I've had cats and dogs myself, so I didn't have to do too much research. I knew them quite well, but we took like research trips to the zoo, filmed the capybaras and lemurs, and the animators were actually creating the performances. They looked at a lot of cat videos, so we had to pay them to watch cat videos. It's not the worst job in the world, I think. But we wanted them to feel believable, that they're not too cartoony, but also kind of conveying a character, and we're not making a documentary as well, so it's about finding the balance where we're telling a story and there's drama and there's kind of storytelling happening, but also wanted to keep them grounded. So luckily there's an infinite amount of kind of references, and we wrote all kinds of guidelines for the animators to kind of have that kind of unified style. We also, for sounds, it was important that we use real animal voices instead of humans mimicking animals, and so
How did you get those animals to make all the noises you needed?
Our sound designer Gurwala, he would record his own cat, and most of these animals are exactly how you see them on the screen, but with the capybara it was a bit more complicated. So he went to the zoo, and the capybaras are pretty quiet. They don't really speak. So an employee of the zoo had to tickle the capybara reaction, but the sound was so high pitched and quite nervous nervous sounding, so it didn't really fit this character. So we had an open casting call for animals, and the audition was won by a baby camel. That's what we chose.
Other questions? Oh, yes, we have two hands. Right in the front.
Yeah, so your vision for the world that these animals move through, the animals are from different continents in real life, and a lot of the scenery, the forest scenery, seemed like different types of forests. So, how did you think about bringing that together and making it plausible that this world could be a little squish of our own?
Yeah, in terms of the environment, we wanted it to feel kind of like an adventure, which means that you haven't seen these places before. Everything is new and unexpected. So we were not trying to make like any specific place from real life, but rather combining different places and building something new. And so we took inspiration from like places in Southeast Asia and Central America and Tibet and Nepal and also European architecture. We wanted it to feel kind of timeless, and that there's no like glass skyscrapers or cars, so that it feels like it could be set at any time. And so it wasn't like maybe it's another world, maybe it's an alternative reality. I wasn't too concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually more interesting to kind of build our own history. So in these environments, we try to kind of give some clues, try and figure out what might have happened. And I think that's more interesting rather than kind of having people talk about that, but when you actually have to pay attention. I think people want to do that. They want to work for it, and they want to kind of participate instead of being spoon-fed. So we kind of get these clues, which we might not see on the first watch. Like there's a lot of stuff happening, but hopefully, like there's like for multiple viewing experience, you get a different experience when you watch it again. But yeah, with the animals, again, I wasn't too concerned about like choosing them from a single area. I just wanted also like the environments to change, that there's a big variety that doesn't feel repetitive. And yeah, maybe there was a zoo that they escaped. That's where they all come from. Or there was maybe they're movie trained actors. These animals. That's how they learned to steer the boat. Maybe they were like taught this as a stunt for a film. But yeah, it wasn't real. Like to me, like that's not the like. I don't think in those terms. I really think in the emotional term.
Sure.
And I think just like I wanted to kind of portray a big variety, like a society within this kind of boat. Like they're all very different, and so I wanted to show how very different types of animals from different places can overcome their differences and kind of learn to compromise and support each other.
Sadly, I think we have time for one last question, which I think there was a hand here. Yes. Oh gosh, there's like three that just popped up.
What was the most challenging shot for you to pull off in the film, and how did you do it?
There are so many challenging shots. As I mentioned, there are two that are almost 5 minutes long, and this means that it starts maybe as a close-up and then it goes into a wide shot and back into a close-up. So it took a long time just to figure out the choreography of all that, and it's supposed to feel very spontaneous and discovered, but there's a lot of thought put into that. And probably one of the hardest was where the cat falls off the boat and then almost drowns, and then the whale would save it, and then the bird picks it up and they fly up in the air, and there's so much happening within the shot. And just so many characters, there's water, which is so hard in any type of film. And that was challenging. There was the first flood when it's that's a very big simulation we had to do. There was later on in the amphitheater with the lemurs, it was just a very heavy scene, and we were basically making this film on our basic consumer PCs. We didn't have a render farm or anything, and work on a free software. So some of our PCs were really struggling with that scene with a lot of characters, a lot of plants and everything. So it was a very big challenge.
Okay, last question.
Which animal was a Latvian?
I guess the cat maybe, I don't know. No, they're very, well, I kind of relate to the cat the most. That's kind of my, I'm kind of trying to tell my story through the cat, and that's why I relate to the most, but I think there's something of me in all the characters. I try to make them relatable, that there are no like heroes or villains, that each of them have flaws, which make them interesting. But yeah, so there's really, I'm really telling a personal story rather than kind of trying to make like something like, it's kind of hard to convey an entire culture within a story. I think then it becomes very kind of broad and unrelatable, but if you go into a personal direction, then you can actually like find